This computer. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Now, this is a really cool video because we have our first guest here on the channel, Mr. Philip C. Quaintrell. So, Philip, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell the viewers about your works.
Hi, yeah, I'm Phil, and I am the author of the Echo Saga and Time of Dragons, and the Ranger Archives, and the Terran Cycle. Now that I think about it, they are starting to rack up a bit.
Yeah, it's incredible that the journey that you've been on from, and everything like that. Now this is quite to get the cheesy stuff out of the way, this is quite a cool video for me. I have read all of the Echo Saga. I'm currently reading A Shadow of Kings, almost finished. Yeah,
Nice.
some of the sorry, Philip, go on. Some of
It's a
the
big book, that one.
it is
That is the biggest. It's the biggest one I've written to date. So I know it's
yeah,
like 800 pages.
yeah, it's crazy, and some of the twists and turns in this one, fair play.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, there was a lot in that one.
yeah, I'm really excited to see how it concludes. So, with that being said as well, before we dive in, we will be talking spoilers in this video. So, if you are currently reading the Echo Saga or Time of Dragons, please bear that in mind. Or if you have read them and for whatever reason you don't mind spoilers, then welcome. So, with that being said, Phil, if would Philip, what would you?
Yeah, Phil's fine.
Fine.
Phil's fine.
Phil, fine, sure. What have been some of your most fulfilling experiences since you started writing and publishing books?
I mean, the very first most fulfilling thing was when I was able to go from doing it in between working in the hospital, doing shifts, to doing it full time. That was sort of like a real, oh wow, I had a dream, and now that dream is my life. Like that was still to this day, it's probably the most fulfilling moment that's come out of it. Um, and that was back in March 2018. And I haven't looked back. That's just been amazing to be able to do this for a job. It's wonderful. Um, and then outside of that, I've had a few, more recently. I've sort of stayed away from all the conventions and things over the years, just sort of had my head down. I've had a couple of kids, so just busy with family life and getting one
Sure.
book out after the next. But I've enjoyed recently. I was on a panel at Comic Con in London. That was really fun. I never realized that I kind of wanted to actually do that, like to be invited to go to Comic Con. That was really great.
Mm,
And having special editions, when you're an indie author, special editions is one of those things that when you get into it, you sort of you don't even put it on your list of things to achieve because you sort of think, I just can't get a special edition. That's not sort of like in the realm of possibility for what I can have access to. But then working closely with the Broken Binding and having a Time of Dragons, those special endless editions, and I know we've got things in the pipeline, special wise coming. That's been a real moment where I feel like, oh wow. And it's another time when the books have surprised me. Like the books just keep
mm.
surprising me with um, what they're able to achieve.
Yeah, it sounds like just hearing that, it sounds really surreal. Like I can't imagine, just transitioning from NHS nurse to writing full time and having all these possibilities and all these things happening. Just
Yeah.
such a change. It must be really like sometimes I imagine you must look back and think, wow, like, oh, this has really happened.
Yeah, yeah, it
Sounds
is very.
incredible.
It's got to the point now, it's been so long since I was doing it. It sort of feels like remembering somebody else's life when I think back to how it used to be with shift work and putting the uniform on and everything. It sort of
Yeah.
doesn't feel like my life anymore.
Yeah, it's incredible, Phil. It really is. Um, so you've sold over 1 million copies of your books. Congratulations again for that.
Thanks. Yeah, that was another
And
moment. I should have said that.
yeah,
That was another moment. That was good.
but yeah, it's sort of like running out of, oh, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this.
Yeah.
Um, and with the possibility of a TV show, which is, amazing as well.
Yeah.
Um, how are you managing all this extra popularity whilst maintaining a balance of enjoying your work?
You do. you have to have some detachment, I suppose, from from it. One of the most wonderful things that I get emails and messages through social media from readers every day of the week, and that is so wonderful. I used to be at a point where I could respond to them all, and now it's a bit harder to respond to all of them now. But it's still wonderful to read all these lovely messages that come in from people. And it's actually just very encouraging. You wake
Yeah,
up to like an email from someone that tells you that the book's got them through a hard time, or that they can't find another book now because they're so invested in these characters.
yeah,
Actually, you wake up to that, and then it really encourages me to sit down at my desk and get the next book written.
mm,
Um, yeah, it's not something, you know, I know there are heights of popularity that I have not achieved where it can get quite toxic and people can be you
sure.
end up getting to a height, I think, where people almost want to bring you down and they want to see you fall.
Yes,
I am not that famous or that popular.
sure.
Um, and I have so far only really encountered just very supportive people who enjoy the books and want more of it. I don't really have a problem sort of having to keep the two separate. My wife's really good at keeping me grounded.
Yeah, that's lovely to hear. Yeah, it's good to, just like have that special someone that, has got your back, got your corner. And, I'm really delighted to hear that, you've received nothing but, uh, you know, positive, you know, feedback, I guess you could say. And it must be I can't imagine how that, you know, in a good way when I say this, to have people reach out to you and just say, I had some terrible moments, but your writing got me through that. It must be a really, really wonderful feeling. And I'm delighted to hear that.
It's one of those things you really don't you almost don't dream of that happening. When you write a book and you put it out there, really all you want is for someone to just read it and enjoy it, and it gives them some escapism and they can just love the story and move on. When you hear from someone that it's got them through a really hard time in their life, um, I seem to have quite a lot of soldiers actually who are fans of the books,
Wow.
and they've reached out and said that it's got them through training or it's got them through in their downtime when they need to just have some real escapism. They've actually found that the books are a go-to. I've had some people say that if they have struggle, sleeping at night, they'll just actually just get a book out and it helps just take their mind off. And you don't dream
Yeah.
of that happening, but when it does happen, you're like,
Yeah.
wow, that's so much more impactful than I had hoped for them. And it again is just more encouragement to keep going and keep getting better at what I do
Yeah.
and produce the next book, get the next story out.
Yeah, that sounds just even hearing you say that there's soldiers that have reached out. That's just extraordinary because obviously what they do, and everything. The fact that they, say, yeah, reading these stories has got me through that. That just sounds extraordinary, and incredible to even
It's really
feel like
lovely.
reading that,
Yeah,
just
it's really good.
amazing. So when you transition from nursing to writing full time, did that have any impact or change in your creative process or storytelling?
Yeah, it helped a lot with the continuity of writing. If you ask anyone who's writing a book with a day job, they'll tell you that the hardest part is picking up a thread, writing it, and then stopping, going to work,
Yeah.
coming home, being exhausted or having other responsibilities that mean they can't write. So then actually they end up in work again. And you can have 2 days or more between writing a single chapter.
Mm,
And then you sort of that thing that you picked up and you were really like thrilled about writing, you then have this big break and then you come back to it and it's just disjointed. And the best thing I found when I went full time was that I could just put 100% of my energy into the story in terms of like you can just let your imagination take a character and go off with it. And your subconscious is like working away at that while you're writing this, and you're not getting bogged down by all the things that you have to deal with in your day job. And
mm,
that level of continuity, just being able to do Monday to Friday every week I mean, one of the best things about that is that you obviously you end up writing faster, so you end up being able to put books out quicker, which as an indie author, when you're starting out, is really important that you sort of keep hitting those regular release dates. So you're staying relevant. You know, you don't have the same marketing power as a publishing house, so you want to be out there as much as possible, making sure that you're putting good quality work out. Um, but yeah, the continuity was the best part about going full time and being able to weave, because you know, you've read the Echo Saga. It's lots of characters in lots of places doing seemingly different things, but they're all connected. They all come together. And that kind of like weaving a tapestry like that required a level of continuity that I didn't realize when I took on the story. Because obviously, when I started writing Rise of the Ranger and Empire of Dirt, I was still working as a nurse. So I was really lucky that I stopped and went full time at the point at which, you know, from book three onwards,
Yeah.
it really needed to get tightened, all those different threads. So it came together at a great time.
I'm pleased to hear that. And it kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but obviously when you're a nurse, it requires a lot of brain power. I imagine a lot of thinking and quick thinking and stuff like that. So I imagine there are times probably when you would do that and then you wouldn't have as much brain power to give into writing in a way. So now that you're doing it full time, it means that you can put your full brain power that you'd usually do on nursing to Verda. And it's sort of just and having that, correct me if I'm wrong, but sort of that routine, that structure must be quite helpful.
Yeah, nursing really helped give me a disciplined sense of routine and just having that mentality to know that when you set out to do something, this is the best way to do it. You know, it's writing books is obviously very creative, and I think stereotypically, what comes with that is the idea that someone is very laid back and they're waiting for inspiration, and I have to go on these long walks and do all this research and watch all this stuff. Whereas actually, one of my strengths is being able to sit down at my desk at 9 in the morning and open my computer and start writing, and I will write the work like, you know, I write inside the school day because, you know, I have kids. So, you know, I'm like 9:30 till sort of like 3 o'clock is when I
Mm.
get 2,000 words done.
Yeah,
And that is only achievable in my opinion because of what nursing did for me in terms of, you know, this is when you turn up for your shift, this is how long you work for your shift, and then you go home, and you're back at this time. You know, it was just one of those jobs as well where all day long, you know, your time management is constant all day long. There's lots of jobs that need doing throughout the day, and you have to hit all of those times.
yeah.
Uh, and that's been really good. When I first started full-time writing, I went a bit, you know, I remember I would wake up in the morning whenever I wanted to wake up. It was before I had kids, so I'd wake up whenever I wanted, and I'd have a lazy breakfast and maybe even watch a film, and I'd start writing at like 11 o'clock, you know. And I eventually discovered that I write so much better in the morning than I do in the afternoon. And I then had to sort of engage that level of discipline that I had put down after quitting nursing. I had to like pick up that again and be like, oh, okay,
Oh,
actually,
interesting.
I need to be disciplined even in this creative thing that I love doing because
Mm.
I work better in the morning, so I have to be around in the mornings to do it. And since then, yeah, I've then developed a working pattern of 2,000 words a day, 5 days a week between 9:30 and 3 o'clock.
That sounds brilliant. And because it's sort of like balance things out because you've got the writing, you've got family,
Yeah.
and when you transition from being quite full on with nursing and stuff like that, and then you go into writing, it's a completely slow down of pace, if that's the right wording.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can take like a bit of time to adjust, even though it doesn't seem difficult. It's still like, to transition to that, it can take a bit of time to, oh, your brain, you're not being full on anymore. You can take your time a bit and stuff like that. So yeah, it's interesting to hear the process that your brain went through into, transitioning in working structure.
Yeah, yeah. It's good to be at your desk as well, and um, because then you're not waiting for inspiration or creativity to strike. Your brain starts to fit into that, like this is when we start and this is when we stop. So it's like in that time period, your brain just switches on in a more creative way because it's like this is now my time. This is my opportunity to be creative. And then I'll go back to being a dad. And it's do you know what I mean? Like it's that kind of it if I had to wait for inspiration to strike, I wouldn't have written for a while. Like you have to be at your desk at that time and give yourself permission to be creative.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Um, when writing your stories, what creative processes do you use?
I only have one process actually, and that's worked so far. I don't plan anything really. I create the characters and I invest all of my creative energy into that character being as real and solid as possible in my head.
Mm,
So that in my head, I know what their backstory is, I know what their life experiences are. Um, but you often, even then, I plan that out to a certain degree. It only really flourishes when you start writing as that character.
mm,
Get into their head while you're writing their POV, and you then start to unlock more of them. And my process is simple. I make them as real as possible. There's always a spark to their story, and often I'll maybe have that as an idea for what the spark is, like where we're meeting this character and what is happening in that scene. But beyond that, I have no idea what's going to happen because the process is simply handing that situation over to the character, letting them react to whatever the situation is, and they will react based upon what I know of their life experiences. That
mm.
informs how they will go about the story. And all I do is make sure that I follow through with the consequences of their choices. I think as soon as the author decides that that character has to stay, or that I want them to go here instead of there, the reader picks up on that interference.
Mm.
And you, as the reader, you're sort of going, "Oh, that's a bit weird." Having read this character for so many chapters, I feel like they would have gone there, but for some reason they've decided to go there. And so, what I prefer to do is just hand it over to the characters, let them make all of the decisions, go where they want to go, fight who they want to fight, pick up what cause they want to, and I just follow that through with the consequences, and whether it be a good one or a bad one. Um, and that, I mean, you've read the Echo Saga,
Mm.
all those, any of those twists, revelations, relationships, anything that happened, I didn't see it coming. It just happened as I wrote it. And for me, as an author, it makes it so much more exciting to be
Yeah,
writing like that because I don't know what's going to happen today.
yeah.
I start typing and I have no idea what's going to happen. As long as I stay true to what that character is feeling and their life, what they've done to date, then I feel like I'm doing my job the best that I can.
That sounds like it's so incredible hearing the context behind that because, I guess from a reader's fan's perspective, if I heard someone say I don't plan, I would think, what?
Yeah,
But, come on, you got to have some sort of idea. But with the context that you've given, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess it's sort of like it works hand in hand if you think like if like thinking about it when you were describing it, because it sort of keeps you as the author excited because it's like, oh, what is this? What is this? What is this character going to do next? And stuff like that. And then it's the reader's sort of a similar sort of mindset as well. So it's
yeah.
really interesting to hear the thought process that goes into and the context given.
Yeah, I'm always hesitant to tell people that I don't plan because I'm aware that there will be a whole bunch of readers who are comforted by the fact that the story that they're reading has been planned out, and
Yeah.
so they are comforted by the fact that the author is giving them something that already has an end.
Mm.
Um, well, that is just not the case with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, but if, without trying to sound like condescending, it's working. And,
Yeah, exactly. If it didn't, I think if it didn't work, I would have changed. I mean, I say that I actually started off by planning, my sci-fi series, The Terran Cycle. I planned that series out to the nth degree. I had every chapter um like planned out in a few paragraphs. And I sort of I grew to dislike that process because I would sit down to write and I would look at my notes and it would say, in this chapter, this has to happen. So,
yeah.
and I knew that I had to write that because all the chapters that came after it and all the books that came after it relied on that chapter happening. So I would then write the chapter as I'd planned out, and the process was just really boring because I'd
Yeah.
already done the fun creative bit when I wrote that paragraph for what the
Yeah.
idea was. And then once I moved into fantasy and I wrote Rise of the Ranger, I said to myself, I'm not going to plan a thing. I'm just going to write this um, completely organically. And since then, I haven't stopped.
Yeah. And I can obviously I haven't admittedly read the Terrence Cycle, but I can see in a way, like I hope this makes sense. When I read the Echo Saga and when I read in the Shadow of Kings, it's going to sound really cheesy, but I can feel the enthusiasm of
Mm.
the writing. I can feel it like when there's a big revelation and it's all like the way it's written, if this makes sense, and it's just like I can tell you had a blast, like just
Okay.
getting that thing out there, thinking, what is that? Or
Well, yeah, I
oh, I
mean,
can't believe that happened. Of
so yeah, speaking of spoilers, because obviously we haven't
course.
spoiled
Yeah.
one of the big moments where
Apologies to cut you off, Philip. I do apologize. I've almost finished with A Shadow of Kings, by the way.
oh yeah,
So
I
just
won't spoil.
got
I
it.
won't spoil that. It's an SI. I should have said. I
No,
would never
no,
spoil that
I'm
for you. It's not even a Time of Dragons. It's a spoiler for the Echo Saga.
got it. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Could you imagine just like, oh, one of the best things ever, right at the end of Shadow of Kings? No, no. I mean,
Yeah.
more twists coming your way, by the way. Lots more.
Oh my God.
Just in that
Oh my God.
slither, you've got a lot more twists. Um,
Oh boy.
in the Echo Saga, I remember writing book four, The Fall of Neverdark.
Yeah.
And I got to the end. It was at the end of that book where um, Vigon and I think Inara are fighting in Namdor. They're fighting. Oh no, they were fighting in Greystone. They're fighting all the orcs.
Mm,
And I think Vigon sort of gives a bit of a speech to the soldiers that are there. They've never faced orcs before. He's
yeah.
faced them before, and he gives them like a little speech about, just being prepared, how to fight them, be brave, that kind of like. And at that point in the book, he was very much to me an audience character. He was there to be the guy that asked questions
Yeah.
but because he didn't know much, he was a loyal, good fighter, but he didn't know much about what had gone on before and the secrets of the world and all that kind of thing. So he was there to ask Elijah and Inara questions, so that you, the reader, could also get that information, like in a more organic form. And that's what he was to me. And then I'm writing that scene in book four, and I remember like pushing back from my chair and just being like, oh, he's going to be the king of Ilion.
Yeah.
Like it occurred to me in book four, then like I know I don't plan ahead, but
Mm,
some things jump out at me, and then you end up with these like big plot points further down the line that I don't hold on to them because they can obviously go away and change depending on what characters choose to do. But at that point, I was like, Vigon's going to be the king, and not just the king of like Namdor. He's going to be the king of Ilion.
mm.
And then yeah, and I have had some fantastic feedback about Vigon. A lot of people have been like they can't decide between him and Asher. Like it's their favorite character, but he then got this wonderful story arc that takes him, down that path. But for me, that was like a moment where I was like, Gosh, this is so cool. I didn't see that coming. That is brilliant. I can't wait to see if that actually happens. That would be so cool if he was king.
Yeah.
And that did. That is the path that it all went down.
Yeah, like when hearing you remember because like obviously so much happened in the Echo Saga, and when I remember hearing you talking about that, it kind of reminds me. Have you seen Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So in the final film when Aragorn is now king, and he does that speech to everyone. That kind of when you were describing that, it kind of reminded me. I remember reading that and thinking, yeah, this is giving me Aragorn
Oh God,
vibes, and
vibes.
obviously
Yeah.
like Viggon is his own character and everything like that. But it's just I was just like, yeah, this guy's gonna go places because he started off as just like, as you said, just sort of like Elijah's buddy and just being there for him and stuff like that to go on this adventure and just to see how Viggon progressed. His arc is beautifully written and it's cool to see where he ended up in the end.
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah. So in response and acclaim from the Echo Saga, did you use anything going into the other books that you've written in the world of Verda?
Um, in what way? You mean like
So
um
like, I guess the best would be like, any sort of story beats or things you wanted to expand upon or anything along those lines.
yeah, there were things for sure that I wanted to like, A Time of Dragons is very much dealing with um how the Dragon Riders came to be.
Mm,
Like what started that? How did that, what are the mechanisms that brought that together? And how does that work? And I wanted to touch on that because obviously, in the Echo Saga, towards the end, you learn that the Dragon Riders of old are not the same as the Dragon, which is like
yeah.
the elven version of Dragon Riders. Like they were very different. The Dragon Riders of old were, warriors, and they were quite brutal in the fact that they
Yeah.
were these sort of like godlike warriors. They knew the power that they had.
Mm,
And I wanted to explore that. And some of the problems that I have, is there's no way, in some ways, the things I can't connect between the two series because these guys don't know about these guys and these guys don't know about these guys.
mm,
And so there's things that we know about that happen in the timeline that sit between the two, like Atalan, the first
yeah.
kingdom, and
Yeah.
all of that. All of that is like 2,000 years away from Time of Dragons.
Mm,
In the Echo Saga, it's 10,000 years ago.
yeah.
So there are things that are important in that middle bit that connect the two, but I have no way of being able to say in what way they're connected
Mm,
while I'm writing A Town of Dragons. So I
cool.
do rely to an extent on, the general intelligence of my readers and picking up on things. I love Easter eggs. I put Easter eggs everywhere.
Oh,
I have connected all of my series in a circle. And so, in my opinion, you can start with A Time of Dragons, Ranger Archives, the Echo Saga.
yeah.
And I know everyone will have a preference to where they would say start, but the reality is you could start with any one of those series and just get into it. You will get a taste for the world and an understanding. I think if you read the Echo Saga first, um, you you might get things flipped a lot, because it's like those characters, are like if you imagine them as being in present day, and they don't know exactly what happened in the past. They don't
Mm,
have all the records, and things have been lied about and twisted and changed. So people in like Ash's time in the Echo Saga think that they know something, and then it gets flipped a lot, as you read. And now in A Time of Dragons, it's nice to go back and write something that is like setting the record straight for
mm,
what actually happened. Because you will find things that feel like a discrepancy. You might find uh, a bit where, there's like a whole bit. I've had a message recently from someone being like, oh, so dragons, if a dragon loses their rider, can the dragon bond with another rider? And I'm like,
mm,
yes. but that never came up in the Echo Saga. It was never
Yeah.
mentioned because it was never something that came up. It wasn't a relevant issue.
We
Whereas in
didn't
Attack of
know.
Dragons, it's a relevant issue, and so it's something I get to talk about and do.
That
Things like
that's
that are fun.
fascinating. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted. Please continue.
No, it's just saying things like that are fun. Just being able to tie little bits together and explain things in more detail in a time period where um, they are uncovering more about how everything starts and how everything began. Whereas the Echo Saga was a lot of flipping everything on its head. Although, I mean, you're reading A Tower of Dragons, you can see I'm still flipping everything on its head.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, there are
that's
some twists in that. I'm just like, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying A Time of Dragons and the twists that I've got going on in there and where that's going. It feels like a 5 book series at the minute. But again, because of the way I write, I just won't know until I'm sort of closing in on that.
Yeah. Well, again, looking forward to continuing to read this journey with A Time of Dragons and just all the twists and turns that will come our way and come your way as well as the writer
Yeah,
and
no,
just,
yeah, they come my way
you know,
first.
yeah, go your way. And but yeah, just thoroughly enjoyed it. And again, that's so interesting to hear, excuse me, how, you know, that because I didn't think about that. I never thought about that. Like, oh yeah, they don't know. So in their mind, they're thinking, yeah, if these two beings are bonded, that's it. Where it's like, no, in the past there is things that can happen. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting to see, depending on where you start, your knowledge, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you read A Time of Dragons first, you're sort of getting the raw truth.
Mm,
And then you'd read the Echo Saga and you'd be like, oh, okay. It seems to be that the people at this point in time, they've not quite got all the facts. And a lot happens. There's a lot of wars and
mm,
lots of bad things happen before, from one series to the next kind of thing. But it's one of those things I think everyone will have their preference on where to start the world of Verda. And it also depends what I wrote the Ranger Archives with very much a single POV point of view. It's just Asher, and I know I know book one gives you um, Nasta Nalaket's POV for a few chapters. The guy that
mm.
trained Asher, he gets a few
Yeah.
chapters. Book two, I gave about 40% of that book to Doran because I just love
Oh,
writing as Doran.
oh, he's great. He's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah, he's one of my favorite characters that I've created. I'm looking forward to getting back to him. I don't know if you've read Leviathan.
I haven't yet, no, but I will
So
definitely get on it.
that was really fun to go back to. It was my first novella. Part of that was me testing myself to see if I could write a short story.
Mm,
Um, and I just loved going back to those characters that I had sort of closed the door on. In my head, when I finished A Clash of Fates, I sort of said, that's it. The Echo Saga is done. And the Echo Saga is the full stop on the Verda universe. I'm now going to go do the Ranger Archives and then A Time of Dragons, and then we'll see what happens. But since I've had some separation from that time period and those characters, my brain is like,
yep.
I was like, well, maybe I could do, a series of novellas that just picks up the plot after the Echo Saga. We'll move a few years down the line,
Mm,
and Asher and Evandriel can be, the main. Because when I finished the Echo Saga, every response that I seemed to get was, please give us more Asher and Evandriel. They're only in book 9. You know, they come together in book 9, and that's it. I gave everyone just like a little taste of them, and then everyone was like, we need absolutely more of these bonded people. And the novella was really fun to just dive into a short story with the two of them, but also at the same time picking up an important plot point that I've not been able to pick up. The Leviathan is all about the
mhm,
Leviathan that lives in the Hawks.
yeah.
And so that was like an important detail for me to deal with, because then, the next novella that I'm going to write is going to still be from their point of view, but we're now going to get into Gideon. We're going to see where Gideon's been all these years and what he's been
Okay.
doing with the Dragon Riders.
Yeah.
And then there might be another novella and maybe even another one. And then my plan. and my plans can always change because my imagination can do whatever it wants. But my plan is to finish A Time of Dragons, fit and in between each book, I'll write one of these novellas. So
Mm,
I keep building on that story that's post Echoes.
yeah.
And then I might write one last big saga that is post Echoes.
Wow.
And that will be the final piece in the circle that bridges completely A Time of Dragons to the Echo Saga. And I'm doing things right now in book three that will set up that post Echoes saga.
Oi, okay.
Yeah. So I'm doing
Amazing.
I'm doing a lot of planning ahead right now, for what will be another big saga in this universe after the Echo saga.
Wow. I was trying so hard not to over the top fanboy throughout that whole when you were just saying that, not go, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, because that just sounds incredible. And obviously plans can change, stuff like that. And I think it's healthy for you as well because it doesn't box you in as well. It just gives you options open to see where things go. And yeah, I'm once I've finished in a Shadow of Kings, I plan to go and read the Leviathan because as you said, like that was interesting because I remember there was a Leviathan, as you said, that was mentioned. I can't remember which book it was, but
It's
that lives there.
a, it's a geographical problem that I immediately thought of. In
Mm,
a post Echoes saga world,
mm,
when you think about the way the Echo saga ends, we very much bridge Eridor and Ilion together. Like we have that kingdom and that kingdom, and they become allies, they become aware of each other. And my thinking was going forward into that world, these two realms need to have stronger alliances, stronger ties. There needs to be trade.
yeah.
I wanted to bring these two realms of man together. And I was like, well, actually, historically, they haven't been able to do that. The reason they've been so detached from each other is because between them is a body of water that is stalked by a monster so big and powerful that nothing gets across.
Yeah.
And so I was like, before I move into a post Echoes saga, I need to deal with some of the geographical issues and some of the things that have been left unsaid so you can see how the world is moving and evolving into
Mm.
what I will eventually write.
Yeah, it must be very fun for you as an author to see how the world evolves from one saga to the next.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the whole world started with an idea of a man in a green cloak on a horse, and I was like, he's chasing something, but he's simultaneously running away from something.
Mm,
That was the first idea for the entire thing was just a man chasing something or hunting something and simultaneously trying to escape something. And that became the foundation for Asher, a man who is always hunting but always escaping his past.
amazing. Um, the TV adaptation of the Echo Saga has obviously generated a lot of excitement. Can you share any updates on its progress or how involved you are with
Um,
the adaptation? However you feel comfortable and allowed to say, of course.
I've got a big call tomorrow evening about it. What can I say?
No worries if we can move on if need be.
Things are moving forward. It just might not be exactly in the direction that they were originally planned
Right.
um, to be. I can't talk exactly too much about
Of course.
it.
Of course.
Only that maybe it might not be the Echo Saga exactly that gets
Right.
told. It might be a different story.
Right.
Um, I can't say too much. Like
No,
I said,
that's fine.
got a few big calls like just in the next week that will
Mm,
actually determine what we're going to do and what's going to be the focus.
mm,
Uh, it will be a true adaptation either way of the books.
mhm.
It's just which books.
Right, I get it. Yeah, and also it's hard it's hard to do an adaptation from book to live action because it's a different sort of experience because I'm preaching, to the converted when I say this, but with books, there's more depth. You can tell what a character's thinking or something like that. Whereas with live action, there's less sort of like depth in a way, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
it's challenging to do. So if things have to be changed slightly and stuff like that, well, yeah, in a perfect world, it'd be great to be perfectly adapted, but it makes sense because it's like,
Yeah.
you look at the Harry Potter films, so like the books differentiate completely differently in some ways to the films
The
because they're just
problem
different
is
sort of storytelling.
with live action, every second of film is money.
Mm,
So every second that is committed to camera has to be important. It has to inform the plot. In a book, you have the luxury of uh, of writing conversations that do nothing more than give you a bigger insight into that character or a relationship that they have,
mm,
or indeed the world. It can be a bit of world building
mm.
that just can't be put into film because it will cost so much money.
Yeah.
When actually, like what the focus is this thing over here. We can't. So you do miss out like the little nuggets. I think that the real trick to doing it is knowing exactly what to cut out and what not to cut out, or what to take and transplant somewhere else so that you still get that thing, but it's maybe told in a more pivotal way.
Mm,
Um, I've not been a big fan of the way a lot of screenwriters have taken books and sort of
mm,
made it their own. And
mm.
I'm always like, I get it. It might be a bit boring for them to take something that's already been written and then just converting that into a script. Um, but the material's already there.
Yeah.
The thing that the people loved to begin with is already there, black and white.
Yeah.
It's just knowing what to take out. Like I remember some chats that we had about the Echo Saga early on. It was sort of like there's 9 books, but we could probably make that into like 6 series.
Mm,
Once you've cut out all the bits that wouldn't be completely necessary. And I've got a lot of characters, so chances are in something like the Echo Saga, they'd probably cut out a character here or there that they felt
right.
their storyline could be handled by another character.
Right.
And again, it's unfortunate, but it all does just come down to money. Making a TV show, the treatments that have been done for the books, at the top of every treatment, it says in capital letters, budget, big. you
Yeah.
know and
Yeah.
I read all the treatments through and through, and it gets to some scenes where you've got in Dragon's Reach in the first 3 books kind of thing, there's like 20 dragons on show kind of thing at any one time. And I remember reading a bit in the treatment that was like, that's expensive. Maybe we can like it'd be more like a flash kind of thing, that where you sort of see that there's dragons in the distance, but
Mm,
the money would go into a singular dragon in the shot.
right.
It's just
Yeah.
things like that, that's in some ways why it's so fun to be the writer of the books, because you're not hamstringed by budgets.
And I think like hopefully adding on to your point, it kind of limits expectations to me as a reader and also to other readers that is excited that look, it might not be 100% what you would expect, but there's re understandable reasons
Yeah.
as to why it's like that. So it's totally fair. Um, as a writer, what do you hope readers take away from your works? Are there any specific themes or messages that you wanted to convey?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get into writing fantasy because I wanted to like break the wheel or anything or
Mm,
reinvent the genre. You know, what I write is like a love letter to the genre. It's all
mm,
the things I love about the genre, the tropes and things, and telling it my way, and trying to be as original as possible while also writing something that's familiar and comforting. Um, because I know it myself as a reader. It's always hard when you pick up a new book that's got such foreign concepts in it that you're sort of it's hard to get your head around.
mm.
I quite like writing things that people are familiar with, but just doing it my way. Um,
Yeah,
And so all I would want people to take away from them is a sense of adventure, that they've taken part in something that has um, carried them away a bit. You know, when they pick up the book, they're really all in, and everything else just sort of drops away for a time. Um, that's really all I want out of it, is for people to just enjoy it. I don't put political messages into my books. I don't even put my personal views in there. Um, I'm a Christian. I go to church every week, and I don't put any of those kind of views in there. There's definitely, a thread of hope and
Mm.
faith in my books, in terms of just the characters and what they fight for, and being courageous. But I'm not writing because it's like a platform and I've got this microphone or something. I am just writing adventures with characters that are believable and in crazy situations. And all I want is for people to enjoy that. And, I I don't sell my books for much either. Like my ebook is sort of like the same price as a cup of coffee from Starbucks.
Yeah.
I've made them cheap so that as many people can read them as possible and just
Wonderful.
enjoy. You get a bit hamstringed with the physical books for sure, because I'm not.
And worth it.
But yeah, that's the thing. Some people think that they're really worth the higher price, and it's just because I can't get my books made in bulk like
Yeah.
a publishing house would.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, you buy it, they make it, they send it. So
Cool.
they're a bit more expensive, but then um, every hardback and paperback has more of me in it, I suppose, because it hasn't been built by committee.
Cool.
It's everything is a
Absolutely.
decision that I've made. So they are more personal. I always tell people to go to the Broken Binding to buy my physical copies, because I handle every book, I sign every book. They're all checked for quality, and they're all reasonable price. So yeah.
That's amazing. And yeah, the art style and the it's very weird, but like the way I say this, but the way it feels, like the way the paper feels as well. Is that it's really weird to say that in a way, but it just feels very fulfilling
Mm.
holding and reading. It's beautifully created. The artwork is fantastic.
Chris
Uh,
McGrath is
yeah.
the illustrator, and he proved to be a real turning point for my career. Um, I've actually dedicated the current book I'm writing to him. He's such a wonderful human being, as well as a fantastic genius when it comes to illustrating. And I remember the first time I reached out to him, I had already published the first three books in the Echo Saga. They had different covers on them. You can probably still find them out there
Yeah, I
somewhere.
did see them. Yeah, I had a look online, but yeah.
Yeah, the original covers are out there. They were done by a graphic designer. And then, but because they were, I was quite successful with those three books, and I was able to do more financially with them. The first thing I did was reach out to Chris McGrath and say to him, it was very much an email. It was like, "Hi, Chris, you don't know me, and you've probably never heard of me. I would really like you to work on my books if you ever done epic fantasy." It was very much, it felt like a long shot, but at the same time, I knew I needed his caliber of artwork to show off the world. And he was so generous. He got back to me very quite quickly and was like, "I've never done epic fantasy. I've always wanted to. Let's do it." And before I know it, I was getting him to redo the first three covers and then all the covers since. And since then, I can't go to anyone else. As far as I'm concerned, Chris McGrath is bringing the world of Verdant to life through his artwork.
Absolutely.
He's
If it ain't
he's
broken, don't fix it.
Yeah, exactly. He's the guy to go to. And in fact, yeah, he's working right now on the new cover. So.
Oh, I'm
Um,
excited for that.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So we're going to be releasing the title as well soon for book three. I've got someone working on a video to reveal that soon, so
Yeah,
that's all coming
cool.
on.
Cool. So, well, looking forward to that. And, I think a couple of things I want to pick up from everything you said there is that during when you were saying how you were sort of sounded like when you were sending that email to Chris, it kind of was like how I felt like I sounded like when I was emailing you. I was like, "Hi, Philip. I hope you're well. My
Yeah,
name is Stuart."
yeah.
And one thing, go on.
that you think you think all these people like the authors, the illustrators, the publishers, the agents, you think you maybe you regard them as a bit of a titan,
Yeah.
because you love their work and you see their work in a more of a public domain.
Mm.
Uh, but they're still people,
Yeah,
like I remember speaking to
exactly.
Chris and saying exactly the same thing. You'd being like, I was really surprised that you responded, let alone that you want to work with me. And he was
Mm.
like, I'm an illustrator. I have to illustrate to make a living. You know,
Yeah,
it, I have to write to make a living. It's that thing where we're not like we're not like gods or anything. I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
you do get to a certain celebrity status, I imagine, where yeah, you can't reach out to George Martin. You have to speak to his agent,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And while I have an agent, I think one of the things that makes indies that much more lovable is
Mm.
our vested interest in actually being engageable and talking to our readers. And I really enjoy talking to my readers. It's really fun. We all have the
Yeah,
same thing in common. We all love
exactly.
chatting about the world of Verdo and these characters and stuff. And I feel
Mm.
like as much a reader as everyone else because of the way I write. It
Yeah.
feels like I'm reading it just like you're reading it. It's just that I'm also typing it.
Yeah. No, I get that totally. So I understand we're coming towards the end, so I just want to get some spoiler questions into it. So I'm going to try and pick and choose here. Here's one. So everyone, spoilers here. If Elijah, excuse me, had survived the end of the story, what do you think would have become of him?
Um, he would have had to have gone into exile,
Yeah,
really, because he will have been regarded by all of Ilion and Eridor
yeah,
as a tyrant. Like they wouldn't understand, like the everyday citizen of Verda would not understand the nuances of a bond with a dragon, and especially his complex bond with Maliath,
yeah.
who is one of these characters um, that he's so complex. Yeah, okay, yeah. So I can say that you've got that far into it, haven't you?
Yep.
Yeah. So he's one of these complex characters that I am so excited to explore in the Time of Dragons.
My girlfriend when I told because I'm gonna give her a shout out. So when I because she doesn't read them, but when I catch up with her, I give her like TED Talks. And
Okay.
I told her the stuff because she has a general understanding, and I told her the stuff of her life, and she just went just and it just like just having that moment with that because I had a feeling when I was reading that bit, and I was like, but who is this? Like, there's a lot of build up that Phil is doing here with this drag. Who
That
is
the bit
this?
is that the bit where he lands in the middle of the
Yeah.
battle and everything stops and he's walking towards the pyramid and
Yeah.
Scar walking towards him and it's like you
Stop.
still you still don't know. And I think I remember writing, I think I remember saying something about his violet eyes and it had like its own paragraph. And I
Yeah.
thought at that point, I thought if you've not read the Echo Saga, that might seem a bit weird that it gets its own paragraph. Maybe not. But if you've read the Echo Saga, at that point you know exactly who we're talking about before I say his name.
As soon as I saw that, I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Wait a
He's
second.
he's got a good chunk of A Time of Dragons to come. Like,
I'm
he's
excited.
yeah, he's a big part of the entire Verda universe. And I'm
Amazing.
excited to tell a story with him on the other side of the line.
Mm,
The Echo Saga, he's very much on one side of the line,
yeah.
and the Tower of Dragons, he's on the other side, and you get to see how he sort of went from one to the other, which is a really fun and unexpected thing. Again, I think when I first started planning out a Tower of Dragons in my head, I was like, oh yeah, Maliath will be in it, and Garganafan will be in it, and they'll probably be part of the Dragon Riders, in my head, I was like, oh, maybe Maliath will be like a wild dragon. He's sort of like on the periphery, and they know about him because of how big he is. Uh, and it was so much more fun to when I was writing it to be like, oh, actually, no, he is 100% integral to how everything started.
Amazing. Crazy.
Yeah,
Honestly, that twist.
with your question, I would say Elijah would have to go into exile
Yeah.
because while handful of people might not, I don't know if they would forgive him. They would certainly be able to understand what happened to him, but I don't think anyone could tolerate Elijah after the events in the last three books. And so he would just have to just go off somewhere.
Yeah. I was thinking like adding on to your point, like he's sort of become like I guess a wanderer in a way, and just sort of like this is really look at me thinking like I can add to the story, but like for example, I sort of pictured him like being sort of this unknown wanderer that helps people, but they don't really know who he is, kind of thing. That's what I was picturing. But like, yeah, I think because he was such a complex character, and it wasn't necessarily his fault that, what he did, he was being manipulative, but it still was him that did those things. So it was
Yeah,
hard for people to differentiate.
I didn't want him to I didn't want him to have that ending where it was like, oh, he's been forgiven. I think some people may have thought that's what happened, but that was just not the case for me. Like the funeral that they gave him, I think even Asher specifies in the funeral that they are the funeral that they're doing is for the Elijah that they all loved and remembered from way back. And it's almost like they're acknowledging that he died in like book four. And that's the Elijah that they were finally giving a burial to. And that the Elijah that we had known in those books and that died at the end was not forgivable, that he actually did, you know, he did the only thing he could do.
Mm.
Um, but I still don't think that gave him any kind of forgivable quality.
No,
Uh,
it was a very, I guess, realistic, sad but sort of realistic conclusion to
yeah,
the story.
there was no redemption there in my eyes,
Yeah,
especially since the realm as a whole would still regard him as being bad
yeah,
and an evil person. So it was more for me, it was more that I was thinking, when I was writing that, I was a father, and I was thinking, how would I feel if it was my son who had gone on to do
of
all those terrible things? Um, and it's hard to fathom if you're not a father. It is hard to fathom
course.
how you feel about your children.
Yeah,
It is so powerful. And yes, if my son did those terrible things, you can't condone it. You can't find an excuse. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't want to find some kind of closure on the boy that I did know. So when they had that funeral at the end, it was sort of like that's what I would need. I would need
mm,
to say something good and finally put my child to rest as
yeah,
I remembered them, as they were before they were corrupted, because that's essentially what happened to Elijah.
yeah,
He was
yeah.
taken off the path he was on and very much turned into the monster.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, there was no redemption there as far as I was concerned, and especially from Goliath.
Yeah. Um, we're coming towards the end, I believe. So I guess a couple questions would be, what advice would you give to aspiring fantasy writers, or just I guess writers in general, particularly those considering self-publishing?
Um, yeah, I mean, first of all, you have to write what you love. Like you can't write something that you're not passionate about. Um, on the other side of that coin, you do have to write something that is commercially viable. I know people that have written books, um, and published them like just the same way that I did, and they haven't worked. And even though the story is good and it's written well, the story itself is so niche, it doesn't it doesn't reach that broader audience. And so if you want to be an author for a living, you really have to make sure that your passions get tied down by something that a large readership will enjoy, which is really hard if that's just not where your passions lie. If that's the case, it might be that you're just not destined to be an author full time. Maybe you just put out your own books and a smaller group of people enjoy them, which is no bad thing. It really depends what your goal is. my goal was to be a full-time author. And I was just very lucky. I was very influenced by things like the Lord of the Rings films, and like the Drizzt books by Salvatore. Those stories that have a really big readership that's just waiting to gobble them up.
Mm.
Uh, so I would say really analyze the story that you're telling and who that will appeal to.
Yeah.
Just because even if it appeals to a smaller audience, and that is okay, that is absolutely fine. If you just want to tell that story, get it out of your head and have some people enjoy it.
Mm.
Just, I wouldn't want people to be disappointed that they've made a book, put it out there, and it hasn't changed their life. I mean, it really might just be that they've written something that's too subgenre.
Mm.
Other advice, the the hard thing as well is unfortunately there is a degree of sacrifice required. Um, if you ask my wife, she'll tell you when I wrote my first few books, she didn't see me a lot. We didn't do a lot. We didn't go out a lot. We didn't spend as much time together as we could have
Yeah.
because when I wasn't working, I was writing. She'd
Mm.
say, "Let's go out and do this and do that," and I'd be like, "I can't. I've got to work tomorrow, so I have to write right now. Otherwise, I won't be able to write for a week."
Right.
So a sacrifice is required. It pays off, as any sacrifice should.
Yeah.
It pays off. I gave a few years, I started writing in 2013 and I went full time in 2018. I could have gone full time in 2017, but I was too chicken. And I held on to my nursing job for like the better part of a year just to make sure that the books didn't drop off a cliff.
Yeah.
But there's like 4 or 5 years there where I was writing and not doing anything. Those books weren't making me a living.
Mm.
And but because I kept loving it, I kept writing, and because I kept
Yeah.
writing, I kept getting better. And then, that those few years where I was writing, I was sacrificing time with family, friends, my wife, and
Yeah.
it paid off because when I could go full time, it was 8 months before my first child was born. So my kids have never known me as a nurse. They think it's weird to hear that I was a nurse.
Yeah.
Um, the job itself really gives you a lot of time. I have so much time with my children. I'm only working while they're in school. They, I'm not sure they know I work. Like they go to school and they come back and I'm just as I was when they left me. So the sacrifice pays off, but you really must be disciplined about it. It's very much a skill that you have to keep at it to get better at it. Um,
Yeah.
the first draft of anything is shit. I think that was Hemingway's quote. I've got it up on my wall in my office.
Mm.
You have to when you finish writing, you have to then go back through it
Mm.
and really tackle it again. Not like write it again, but you have to really analyze everything that you've written, um, and just be disciplined about it. Finding those times when you can write and sticking to it, if you're really serious about making it as a living. And then apart from that, I would say while you're being very disciplined and writing a schedule when you can write, simultaneously, I would say save whatever you can. And again, this comes down to sacrifice. You have to, um, there are things you have to cut out. I cut out a lot of hobbies that I had so that I could save up to pay for an illustrator and pay for editors. Um, that's just the way it is. No one is free. Everyone's work costs something, and you cannot publish a book without it having gone through an editor and without a cover that has been made by someone who makes covers for a living.
Yeah.
But someone, it was Ian Sainsbury, who's an author, a friend of mine. He gave me some great advice years ago when I was still working as a nurse. He said, um, "Look, look on Amazon," and he said, "Look at who you want to sell beside,
Mm.
and how do you look like that?" And so I went onto Amazon, and Brandon Sanderson just sort of dominates a lot of fantasy, doesn't he? And his covers are gorgeous.
Wow.
And I think at the time, Kel Cade was doing really well with the King's Tide series. And I reached out to her, and she was like, "Yeah," she said, "It's Chris McGrath doing my covers," and Brandon Sanderson had Chris McGrath, and I was like, "Well, I want to sell beside these people. I want to look." There is a stigma still to a degree against indies. There are people who won't pick up an indie book if they know it's an indie.
Mm,
So part of the trick is making yourself look like a traditionally published book. And so that means getting a good graphic designer to do the graphics, and
yeah.
a good illustrator to give you the artwork, and a good editor to polish the book.
Mm,
Because that's all the publishing houses do.
yeah.
They have all these people who do these jobs for a living, and they all get their turn with the book before it's released. But they just cost. So again, the sacrifice is your time and your money to build the product. But when it's done, the sacrifice should pay off.
Amazing. Amazing. Um, I believe that's to end. Sorry, we've gone a little bit over schedule, so thank you so much, Philip. I appreciate that. Um, Before we end, do you want to just give just sort of where readers can find you to socials, whatever?
Yes, I mean, if you go on my website, philipcquaintrell.com, the first thing it will do is come up with a thing where you can put your email in, and you can get onto my mailing list. I don't spam people. I don't send a lot of information out through the mailing list. I just send out vital information before I put it onto social media. So you get a bit of a heads up on what I'm doing, what's coming out, where to get it from, just interesting news about the books and things like that. I'm not going to send you something every week. Apart from that, I've got accounts on Instagram, X, Facebook. I know there's a few, there's some things on Facebook, and there's some things on Discord and things like that that other people have started, like other groups and things where people can chat. It's all there's stuff all out there, everywhere. Which is wonderful thing about the internet is that, you get these readers that love your work, and then they take it places for you.
Yeah, yeah,
That's the really fun part, because then you discover it. Like sometimes I'll be scrolling through Instagram, um, and I'll see like a little picture, and I'll be like, "Is that one of mine?" And I'll click on it, and someone's put a post out about my book, and I'm like, "Oh wow,
right.
that's nice." It's fun coming across your own work and someone else's thing.
Yeah, brilliant. All right. Thank you everyone so much for watching. Walling. That's if that isn't a word, it is now. And Phil, thank you so much for kindly joining today. Appreciate it. And hope everyone has a good rest of your day.